All right, guys, how's it going for you? This is Coach JG here with Vej Athletics, and this is the health episode of the podcast. This is the health podcast. So today I'm talking about how you can train as an athlete for longevity. Most people get into a rhythm where they're going to the gym, doing their same thing, whether it's you always do yoga, whether it's you only bike ride, whether it's you only run. I hope that I hope that a lot of people know when we do our strength and conditioning for athletes, we're hitting every different aspect. So we're hitting mobility, we're hitting strength, we're hitting conditioning for most sports, and building a complete body, trying to combat um, the adjustments that our bodies make and the imbalances that are created within our bodies when you play a sport or just going through everyday life. That's a component of training as an athlete. So the average person can take that and apply that right to their training. I have a close friend of mine who started training with me. We used to play basketball together. Now, most young guys get into their meathead phase where you're just bench pressing, you're just working on strength and trying to get bigger. And that creates a lot of imbalances. That creates a lot of issues orthopedically within your body that we're resetting now and rebuilding for him. So I think these components apply to a lot of people. And I want to go point by point here. So when you're playing sports, most of us who grow up and you're playing sports, whether it's volleyball, whether it's we grew up playing basketball, whether it's hockey, any sport where you're skating, swimming. These are all repetitive sports where you're putting your body through the paces repetitively. And that's not even considering if you're getting injuries, if you're coming back from multiple injuries and things of that nature. So what that does is create imbalances in the body. When I was growing up playing basketball, I'm much better now. But hamstrings, most basketball players, these kids can jump out the gym, but they can't lift their leg on top of a table and keep the leg straight. That hypertonicity that occurs because that muscle keeps doing that repetitive short jumping motion, and it shortens, especially if you're not stretching after practice, especially if you're not doing a proper mobility warm-up. Something like hockey. A huge amount of my hockey kids have hockey hips, and they want to always stand wide, and they want to run wide. That's what we call running like a hockey player. You see this kid run like they're skating with their legs out wide because their body has adapted, and that's where it wants to go. So playing sports is automatically, especially if you get to a high level, it's going to push your body outside the norm. And now you have to reset and rebuild and do things to try and push your body a little bit back to homeostasis. And it is a balancing act because those adaptations that you make are what's making you better at your sport. The adaptations to the shoulders, to the hips, to the spine that happen for a swimmer or a gymnast or what can help make them elite. But at the same time, if that gets pushed too far, if your spine is too unstable, if your shoulders are too mobile, that can also leads to weakness, that leads to injury and things of that nature that are also going to take you out of your sport. So that doubles there. And so just talking about the average person, what happens to us kind of after we finish playing sports, most people when they finish high school and they finish university, is we sit down and we're driving a car all day. We sit down and we're at a desk all day. We sit down and we're hunched over looking at our phones for a big part of the day. Even for athletes, for kids now, that's happening as well. But that's something else. So that becomes what you need to combat against. That becomes what you need to alleviate. So we need to open up the hips from that sitting position. More and more people are getting standing desks now. If you can switch up your day and get up out of your chair, it can be exhausting at first, but spend more time in a standing position. That's going to make a huge difference in terms of burning calories and in terms of resetting your body and restabilizing your spine. And then the average meathead that does a ton of bench press creates a ton of internal rotation in their shoulders. Now you got to combat that. You got to strengthen the back. You got to mobilize the shoulders. You have to mobilize the thoracic spine and improve posture. So that sedentary lifestyle that a lot of us can get into, or even a sedentary job, that can wreak havoc on your body. And then on the opposite end, there's very active jobs that are orthopedically stressful or dangerous, right? If you're working as a mover, I would say if you're working, most contractors, you're bending down to pick things up. You might be not be doing so perfectly. You're getting into awkward spots. First responders, police, firefighters, emergency staff. You're lifting obese people and maybe wrestling with criminals, things of that nature. Those are things, especially when you have to lift and twist and bend at awkward angles. Those are really stressful on the spine as well. So we need to spend time re-strengthening the spine, maintaining mobility in it, maintaining its ability to rotate and explore those positions. When I put my friend through just a little rotation stretch, we heard this massive crack in his back, and I go, oh my god, that could be a lawsuit. But he told me how much relief that he got from it, because from that crack, it sounded like his spine hadn't gone there in a long time. In a long time. So make sure you do that with a professional. I certainly don't crack backs. Do that with a chiropractor or a physiotherapist. But if you get out and you do some yoga, or you go through some mobility drills, you're going to awaken new parts of your body, and you want to explore and you want to build that. We lose mobility over our lives. And if you don't regain it, as you age, it is much harder to get it back. It's much harder to get it back. So there's sports, there's sedentary work or lifestyle, and then there's kind of, I don't know how to term it here, orthopedically stressful work that are all things that we need to reset and help fix the body. Now, when you're doing that, let me go through the pieces here. So low back is number one. I want to go through 3 parts. Low back. If you're experiencing low back stress, that can be from a variety, any one of those things that I just mentioned. But essentially what the mechanism is for many people, including my athletes, a lot of my athletes, glutes aren't active. So if your glutes aren't active, and if they're not working, and if they're not taking stress, a lot of the time the low back takes that stress, and the muscles of the low back are not as big, they're not as strong, and that pushes you closer to that realm of injury, right? It's like a big 300-pound guy can lift something and he can handle it, but if a 200-pound guy is lifting that same thing, and let's say they have the same fitness level and relative strength level, he's not going to be able to lift that thing as many times. So the low back cannot take as much stress. It cannot handle as much as the glutes can, and you're going to shift it close. You're going to shift closer and closer to injury the more that the glutes aren't working. The low back is doing the work. As well as, so that's on the muscular level. On the spinal level, you could be creating disc damage. So if you're doing twisting motions, if you're doing bending motions, if you're not lifting with the hips, you could actually be damaging the discs in your spine. Look up Stuart McGill, backfitpro.com, backfitpro.com. Stuart McGill's Canadian spinal researcher, one of the top ones in the world. And he talks about how the discs in our spine have a finite amount of stress that they can handle. You have a finite amount of stress that they can handle. So each twist, each bend, each time you put that disc into a position it's not supposed to get into, you're reducing its lifespan. And eventually that leads to, possibly whether it's bulging, whether it's popping, and then you have fluid coming out. Those are issues that you don't want to come across. So walking is number one. Walking, get out and walk. Brian Carroll, Stuart McGill, these guys talk about that, how just the most natural human movement is super therapeutic for the spine. And I can say that myself as somebody who's competing in sport where I'm having, hundreds of pounds loaded on my spine. When I take the time to get on a treadmill, do some treadmill walking, do some hiking, do nice long walks outside, the relief on my spine is incredible. You get that relief. It is very therapeutic for the spine. And I don't know the mechanism as to, other than the blood flow and just getting that natural movement. I don't know the mechanism, but walking is very therapeutic for the spine and for low back pain. I would say introduce rotation. So start introducing gentle rotation, Could be bird dogs. When you wake up in the morning, I generally recommend to my clients, especially my older adults who have wake up with stiff backs. Could be gentle yoga stretching. Could be, sideline rotation. It helps to have, when you do that sideline rotation stretch, it helps to have something planted under the knee to help give your body some support and help your body relax there. But introducing your body back to that rotation, little by little by little, that is huge, because when you increase that range of motion of rotation, you increase your body's margin for error. You're less likely to rotate too far when you're lifting something, twisting, whatever, and hit a range that you don't have, and then that becomes a strain. That becomes a strain in the spine. So reintroduce rotation and get rotation back into your spine. And then decompression. Again, look up Stuart McGill. He's got a lot of great stuff on this. Donnie Thompson, he's got a lot of great stuff on this. Could be hanging from a bar, could be tying a band around your leg, which I used to do with a lot of my figure skaters who do tons of jumps throughout the day. And they're always experiencing that spinal compression, that repetitive spinal compression. So work to decompress the spine. Those are opportunities we don't always get. And the other thing is, when you're sitting, when you have that sedentary lifestyle or sedentary workplace, sitting is much more compressive on the spine than standing. That is one of the benefits of a standing desk or of walking. Sitting is much, I forget the exact number, but it's much more, it's more than 2 times as compressive to your spine than being in a standing position. Second thing is shoulder restriction. So as we age, we spend much more time forward, driving, writing, typing, sending emails, being on our phones. On top of, many people especially men, see the mirror muscles, the pecs, the shoulders, the biceps, and they just want to work those muscles. I fell prey to that when I was a teenager. And we end up with being super tight and strong and hypertonic. So those muscles are always on in the front and ready to go and ready for stress. We end up in internal rotation, so the shoulders sloping forward, and poor posture. Not only does it look bad, but that can create pain in the shoulder, and you're losing range of motion. A lot of people that I see lose the ability to lift their shoulders up overhead in a proper range of motion. Women as well. I see this more and more. I see this more and more in women. So the keys to that is strengthening external rotation. Cable external rotations are a great method I use with most of my clients. You can look up that on the Vej Athletics YouTube. I have a full tutorial of the cable external rotation. Cables are great because cables give you a nice, smooth, long range of motion, and the resistance is the same at each point. There's also multiple external rotations, whether it's supinated, whether it's pronated, whether it's standing with open shoulder with bands. You can do just tying a band to something. The downside with bands is bands get heavier as you increase that range, and that the further you go into external rotation, the harder it's going to be for most people. The weaker those muscles are going to be. So the strength curve of a band doesn't always work perfectly, but you can work with a light band or a micro band, a very skinny band, and most people are going to be able to do that if they're not extremely restricted through there. And then work to achieve an overhead position. Work to achieve an overhead position. I'm not just talking about overhead press with a barbell. We never overhead press with barbells. With my athletes, we push press, we jerk. We never overhead press with a barbell. It's too hard on the shoulder blades being fixed. We don't do it. We use either dumbbells, we use fat bells, we use kettlebells, we do push press, but not overhead barbell. We don't do that. So I would recommend the same to you, and then hang. You can grab onto a pull-up bar and just hang and just hold that overhead position, push your head through. And that's a great way to have your body experience that overhead position. I just started working on doing handstands, something I've always wanted to do. They are tough, but I've reached the point now where working on my shoulders, working on that mobility coming back from a rotator cuff tear, I can achieve that stacked position, and I'm still working on it. But if you have that strength, that is a great isometric drill you can do to just hang there as well. And then lastly, mace work. I've been raving about the mace. Maybe down the road I'll do a full podcast on the mace. But I use Christoph and Shoulder Rock. Great product to help your shoulders experience how to contract, relax, experience thoracic, more range through the thoracic spine. So working with a mace is great in that regard. And don't just think, one of the go-tos and one thing that I've always told people, I've told a lot of people, is you want to do twice as much pulling exercises to pressing exercises, and I stick with that. But just working the back, so just doing pull-ups, just doing row variations, is not going to help you achieve ideal posture or ideal health for the shoulder. These smaller correctives, the mace work, the hanging, the external rotation, are going to be required, because a lot of the times when people are doing rows, they're doing pull-ups, whatever it is, the shoulders are still rolling forward. You might not have perfect technique on those exercises, and even if you do, there is still more work to be done in the small stabilizing muscles and postural muscles and combating that hypertonicity. And then last piece I want to go into for making sure you're training like an athlete and for longevity, to reset your body, to feel better over time, is your feet. Your feet. I want to go over a couple things of foot training here. I'm a big proponent of Vivo Barefoot. Vivo, you guys need to pay me. The amount of clients I've gotten to buy Vivo Barefoot, and the amount of times I've pushed you guys, I got to get that. I got to push for that Vivo sponsorship. So subscribe here to the YouTube and the podcast so we can get that Vivo Barefoot sponsorship. Spend as much time as you can in bare feet. If you're at home, don't walk around in socks. Take your socks off. Even the regular socks that we use, squeeze our toes in. Most of the time, most socks are still squeezing your toes in. And what we want to see to strengthen the foot is the toes to splay again. Like when you see a baby's feet, babies have that little space between their toes. We squeeze ourselves into tight shoes. We squeeze ourselves into those socks, and over time, my feet are just resetting now. It takes a couple of years, but compared to the fact that I've been 30 years walking around with my feet squeezed in, you'll start to see the feet splaying and strengthening. And if you get yourself a nice pair of barefoot shoes and you're not walking around in socks, so if you get the barefoot shoes, don't put socks in the shoes. Wear them with no socks. Your feet will begin to splay again. And there's other drills that you can do. Vej Athletics, Christophen's other company. I love everything the guy does. Genius when it comes to strength conditioning and strengthening the body. He has tons of products in there. The HP trainers, which are socks that fit the toes. Vibram makes the toe shoes. Merrill makes open splaying toe shoes. So you don't have to have the weird looking toe shoes. I know some people don't like that, but I have several pairs of Evos. They just look like regular sneakers, but my feet feel amazing. And this, for the first time in my life, after I got these shoes, I started taking walks for fun, which I've never done. I'd go out, ride my bike, hated walking. Now it feels so good that I will take walks for fun. And roll your feet. Roll your feet. Get a lacrosse ball or a massage ball. Step on it, put some pressure into it, roll the bottom of your feet every day, every workout, I would say. It should be multiple times a day. When you release that fascia at the bottom of your foot, going to move better, going to feel better. There's a fascial line that goes from the bottom of your feet all the way up your back. So that release makes a huge difference in terms of the whole body. And all my clients, that's the first thing that we do when they come in the gym. They roll their feet, and if we are going to do activation drills, we're going to do them in socks or barefoot. So if you want to train as an athlete for longevity, if you want to, everybody should be training as an athlete, and that just means incorporating all those components of fitness, strengthening your body, mobilizing your body, resetting your body, and bringing it back to homeostasis from all the stressors that you've given to it. You're going to feel better. Add those things in little by little. You're gonna look better. I'll probably do a part 2 on this and talk more about explosive training, but this is more about just taking care of your body. So incorporate that, guys. Hit me up if you have any questions at coach_JG on Instagram, or Jordan at vejathletics.ca. Vejathletics.ca is the website. I'll see you guys later. Vej Athletics.